Hello and welcome to Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started. Our catalyzing statement is a successful entrepreneur inside of every business. Enjoy this module. Welcome to Module 1, Values-Based Decision Making. And I have to tell you, this principle has had immense impact not only on my business, but also on my personal life. And when you really get this principle, you're going to see a lot of stress go away. So Rick, why don't you tell them about what values-based decision-making is?
Okay, well, let's just look at the words, values-based decision-making. And basically what it really is using a set of criteria from which you make decisions from this point forward in your life. So let me use an analogy to help explain it better. I want you to imagine that your life is a room. It's no longer your life anymore, it's just a room, and that room represents your life. And I want you to imagine that there's only one entrance into that room, and there's a door coming into your life. So I want you to imagine that, and I like to use this analogy myself, that I have a doorman sitting at the door into the room of my life. If I were to hand that doorman a list of my values and the criteria by which I let anything come into my life, whether it's a human being or a project or a new business idea or whatever, imagine, if you will, that this doorman, when somebody enters your life, they look at this list of values and they say, no, you can't come in your life. You can't even get in the life your toe. So you've heard the term to not let somebody's toe in the door. Well, it's very interesting. Once a human being, a spouse, a potential spouse, an employee, a potential business opportunity, once they get their toe in the door, I want you to imagine that they're in your life forever. And I would assert, and people have challenged me on this, that every single problem that we encounter as individuals starts because we let somebody past our doorman. And I would like this nomenclature or this word to be used throughout the next year. I want you to think about the doorman. What are you letting past your doorman? What opportunities are you letting into your business that are distracting you? What employees are you bringing into your business that are not bringing value to your business? That's the beginning of values-based decision-making. And over the past 2 years, Patrick, you and I have talked a lot about values-based decision-making.
Well, you know, on our accountability calls that we're on, we actually now refer to this as the doorman principle because that's really the way that you characterize it when we're talking. And what's been really interesting is that whenever, and this is the thing I really want you to hear, because what he said is very profound. Whenever we have something that kind of sidetracks us, puts us into the ditch, creates an issue or a problem for us, Rick will always be able to trace it back to say your doorman wasn't in place and you let this person in and that's why you're having a problem right now. Because you're very much about rules in business, regiment in business. And so often, especially in my entrepreneurs who get out there and get things going, we're very random in business. We get inspiration, we get a quick gut feel without going through a specific process, and we're kind of letting people in on too, I guess, wimpy a criteria. So the idea of having the list and saying, here's the list, and imagine again that there's a doorman there. If they don't meet the criteria of the list, they can't even get a toe in the door, and that's how you stay safe, protected, empowered, and you don't have people that take you away from what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Right, and they have to keep in mind this problem. You keep this in mind when you're making decisions. It is way more expensive to get somebody out of your room once they're in your room than it is to not let them in the room in the first place. Think about someone who's married the wrong spouse as an example. Think about, in business, taking on the wrong client. A lot of times people look at opportunity over values, and that will get you every time. Every time you bring on a new client or a new employee or a new vendor or a new whatever, and you're looking at opportunity first, it will always cost you more in the end. Now, You may be able to make a little bit of money for a week or a month or a year or 5 years, but it will always cost you more in the end.
How would somebody go about starting to create their list of values? What process would you recommend for that?
Okay. Well, first we're talking about personal values. That's how I took the question. But you also have values by which you run your business. You have values by which you hire. You even have values by which, as you know with me, when I went through the process of finding my wife, I wanted a certain type of woman.
Yeah.
And so I created a list of values. And when I was dating, if a woman didn't fit those values, I basically realized, well, this isn't going to be a lifer, so let me, keep looking, keep the search open. But the reality is,
And incidentally, I'll say, if you don't mind, because it's on our calls, you sent us literally the list. In other words, he puts into practice what he's talking about. He sent us a list about this long on a sheet of paper, typed up, of the specific values he was looking for in a mate, in a spouse. And literally, if somebody didn't have or didn't exemplify these values, they didn't get through the door.
right. And you want to look at values from the perspective of the decision that you're trying to make. So we said it earlier, but you have values for your business and the type of clients that you want to have. You have values for the type of people you want to hang out with, potentially. You have values for the type of mate you want to have. You can even extend it to, and I love talking about this as it relates to being a parent. A lot of times parents believe that their children's friends are a random occurrence. And I have seen kids, because I have 32 nieces and nephews, I have seen them get into a lot of problems because their parents never sat down with them and said, okay, little Johnny, what do you value? Right. And you talk about positive values, and then you say, little Johnny, I want you to imagine that the people that you bring into your life that are going to bring you joy and happiness and fulfillment are people that value these things that we've written down here. Right. And let the child have a sense of ownership. And that's values-based decision-making at its best. It's using a set of values to decide what you're bringing into your life. And we could talk about some examples.
Yeah, please.
Well, I can tell you firsthand that every single time I've hired an employee who did not work out, every single time, it was because of one of two reasons. Either A, I didn't clearly articulate the values of the person that I was looking for, or B, I chose opportunity over anything else. Right. And so as a business person, and you'll hear this theme throughout the course of the program, as a business person, I think any time that you take away from the business, away from the reacting chaos that most people go through as business people, and you sit quietly in a room and you really think through what are the attributes of this person that I'm looking for, what are the attributes of the next deal I'm looking for, what are the attributes of the future of the business, and if you can write that down, I'm not talking about a business plan, which can be daunting.
Right.
I'm talking about simple rules and using those rules to make decisions.
Can you give an example of some of the rules that you use, for example?
Okay. Well, in the example of hiring,
Yes.
a lot of people really get overwhelmed by the hiring process because they just want to get the position filled.
And incidentally, we're going to have a full module on hiring later, so that's coming up, but nonetheless, I think this is a good way to portray how this applies. Go ahead.
Right. So let's use a real example. A very close friend of mine is trying to hire a lifetime assistant. And a lifetime assistant, I believe, is incredibly important to any entrepreneur. And if you look at very successful entrepreneurs in the world, you'll find that all of them understand the value of a lifetime assistant.
What do you mean by lifetime assistant?
Well, if you go out to Hollywood, what you'll find is these stars are surrounded by people who love to support them.
Right.
And a lifetime assistant, in my opinion, is someone whose lifetime job, something that gives them true passion, is supporting you at your true passion, which could be whatever your career is, whatever you're trying to get accomplished in the world. And here again, taking the time out of your life to decide what are the attributes of the lifetime assistant that you want, and then looking for someone that fits those characteristics. But let me go back to the question that you asked. This is very simple But let's say, for example, you're trying to hire a lifetime assistant. And if I asked you, what are the attributes you're looking for? You would say things like, I want somebody who's responsive. I want somebody who speaks clearly on the phone. I want somebody who is a good writer. And then when I ask you, well, what process are you going through? A lot of times people will say, well, I met a few people, they came to my office, I interviewed them. I said, what do you mean they came to your office and you interviewed them? That doesn't make sense, because that doesn't fit the attributes. You just told me you want somebody that's responsive, that's good on the phone, and that's a good writer.
Right.
What I would do in that case is I would get a bunch of resumes and I would set up phone interviews. And I would see who was responsive on the phone, who did what they said they were going to do, who spoke clearly on the phone, who was very articulate in how they wrote their emails. I wouldn't waste 1 minute meeting them in person, because you're not going to get the data that you need. That's one very quick example.
Another one that you give is your criteria when you're looking to invest in or buy a company. You have certain criteria about the company that are saying, these are deal breakers if these values aren't met here, or if they have a certain practice that you don't agree with. You want to talk about a couple of those?
Right. So, and again, this is just sitting down and taking the time away from your business to decide what are the attributes of whatever. So in Patrick's question, we like to invest in companies that have certain characteristics. And we actually have a list of 30 characteristics. So earlier I talked about getting your foot in the door. I don't want to waste time in my day. So why would I interview a potential investment by talking to the CEO if they're in industries that we don't like? And the industries that we don't like, and I'm not saying these are bad industries, but one of our characteristics is we don't like wings or wheels. If there's planes, trains, automobiles, deliveries, inventory, things like that,
They don't get in the room.
they don't get in the room.
Right.
And why waste time? We tend to like things in healthcare, as an example. So if they have a healthcare characteristic, we'll look at them. But there's a lot of things like companies that are heavy on nepotism.
Yeah.
We have found that investing in a company that has a lot of nepotism doesn't work for us. So if it's a husband and wife team, it doesn't get past the doorman. So I don't want to complicate this by giving you our 30 characteristics, but I want you to get a sense of, say to yourself, wow, every mistake that I've made in business over the past X number of years was caused by me letting a situation or a human being get in my life, get past my doorman, get their toe in the door, and I can't get them out. And he's right. It costs far more money to get them out. Now that I know this principle, I will stop them at the door and I will move on.
And money, stress, and pain. And it's not even just money, but it's also the stress it brings to your life and the pain that it is to try to have to deal with this situation. It's a distraction.
Right, and just so they know, whenever we say money, we mean energy, because energy turns into money.
Right.
We mean relationships. We mean leakage out of your life.
Varying forms of capital.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, something that, another one of those simple, like, wow, well, that obviously makes sense. But the question is, have you put into practice in your life a list of values that you have for your business, which incidentally, we're not moralizing saying your values need to be this or need to be that. We're just saying you need to have objective, explicit values that then get handed to this imaginary doorman, but this person lives fictitiously in your mind as a metaphor to say that my life is a room, certain people can get in and certain people can't. And if you're in a circumstance where there's no doorman there and anybody who happens to show up at your door can just walk through, you are now opening yourself up to all kinds of stress and lack of productivity and destruction to your business that can threaten the very existence of it depending on who walks in that room. And that goes for a partner, an employee, a vendor that you work with, people that are clients, anybody that comes into your room suddenly has influence in your life. So having specific value criteria that you hold hard to before you let these people in is transformational to your business. And I got to tell you, at first when I heard Rick talk about this, I was like, well, it seems like kind of a neat idea, and then I started to apply it retrospectively. I started to look back at every challenge I've had in business over the years I've been in business. And the biggest challenges, literally the death threats that threatened my business in unprecedented ways, were always related to people that I never should have gotten involved with. And if I had the clear list of criteria, which you need to create and which is going to be a part of your homework, if I had that list of criteria, I would have saved myself so much time, so much money, so much energy, so much stress. It would have been an entirely different experience for the last 20 years of my life, a much better experience. So we're hoping that you learn from this principle and that you apply it immediately to your life.
One of the promises of this program is that the things that Patrick and I teach you can be implemented quite easily, and my hope is that you can put it right on the ground in your business immediately. And one thing that people often ask me is, how can I find out what my business's values are? And we've come up with a very simple way for you to find out your business's values right now. Now, this is funny, I chuckle because there's companies that you can hire that will take all of the team members to an offsite. You could pay them a lot of money, and they can interview executives and interview employees and interview vendors and clients, and they could say, here are your values. But quite honestly, I think that's an expensive waste of time, effort, and energy. What I like to do is tell companies this. When you get your homework for this module, you'll notice that in there is a list of about 100 various values. And you could add more to the list if you want. And here's one simple way that in 15 minutes, you can come up with your company's values, and you could end all of the drama around that. Because when it comes to values-based decision making, you need to know what your values are as a company. So here's what you do. Take the list of values in your homework and make 15 copies of that page. And then what I want you to do is get 5 people into a room. You'd be one of them, of course, so it's 4 other people. And you want those to be people that are very important to your business. It could be a shareholder, an important executive, someone outside the business that's an influencer, like an advisor or an important vendor. But you want to get 5 people in a room, and you hand each one of the 5 people 3 copies of that document. So you're going to be one of them. You'll have 3 copies of the set of values in front of you, and each person will have 3 copies. And here's the question you ask. I want all of us to imagine in our mind the employee of this business, whether it's real or imagined, who fully embraces all that this company represents. So you want your best employee. Now again, real or imagined. But you want to, hopefully you have had a really good employee. So let's say the employee's name is Sally. So in your mind's eye, you, because you're doing the exercise too, and your people in the room that are with you, I want you to have them check off on that set of values 7 values that Sally represents. And Sally may represent integrity, she might represent responsibility, she might represent customer service, whatever those values are. And if the people want to do a write-in value that Sally represents, that's fine too. So once they do the values that represent Sally, you collect those 5 sheets and you put them aside. So now you've got 5 different sheets that 5 different people filled out that are their interpretation of the values that that perfect employee represents. Now you say to them, who's the second employee or the second person or the second type of person, if it's imaginary, that fully represents everything this company stands for?
And could it be a client, also a vendor? It could be anybody who's got relations with the business who experiences it, right?
Right. Anyone who fully embraces what the company stands for. We all have at times witnessed clients who love our brand and love who we are. That would be perfect for this exercise. So you do it again. So now all 5 people check 7 boxes, 7 values, and you collect the sheets, put them aside. And now you do it a 3rd time. Again, this is all fully explained in the homework, but I want to make sure you understand what it is. Now, at the end of the exercise, which should not take more than 15 minutes, I just did it with a company last week. It took about 10 minutes. I then had 15 sheets of paper with 7 values each. So 15 times 7 what does that come to? I believe it's 105.
That's correct.
Okay, but what you'll notice is when you lay those values onto a spreadsheet, that the same words will be coming up over and over and over again. And what you want to find is the word that is mentioned most, that's your number one value. The word that is mentioned second most is your number two value. You want to have 5 to 7 values that represent your company, not more than 7 that represent your company. Personally, you could have 9, 10, 11, but as a company, you want it to be straightforward. Then, as the CEO or the executive in charge, whatever your role is, you're responsible for those values. Take the word, let's say the number one value in your company is responsibility. Just add a sentence after responsibility. So you could say, for example, responsibility is incredibly important to the future of our business, and we take our responsibility to our clients and our community extremely seriously, period. And that's the end of value number one. And you do the same for each one of your values. So now your 5 to 7 values have a word followed by a phrase. And that is the simplest way to come up with your firm's values.
So from that now, you have values-based decision-making that can occur objectively, explicitly. You have now a complete orientation for the doorman. You know, again, that's a figurative person, but literally, this is the marching orders for the doorman who is going to prevent people from getting into your life or into your business that shouldn't be there.
Yep. Now, just to add to that a little bit, you did this exercise as it relates to your business. You could also tailor the exercise as it relates to your life.
Sure.
Your marriage, maybe who you want to hang out with as couples, your children. You could take this exercise further. But I wanted to show you a very practical way to come up with values. And I'd like to add, we're all entrepreneurs in some way, shape, or form. I believe that entrepreneurs, and they become entrepreneurs for this very reason, are addicted to yes. We say yes to everything. And we think that saying yes is a good thing. But when you think about people that you really look up to and people that you aspire to be like, maybe they run a very big business, or they run a very big organization of some kind, or they have a great family in combination with being successful in business. These people say no. And I love Warren Buffett's quote. He says the difference between successful people and extremely successful people is that extremely successful people say no to almost everything. What does that quote really mean? What it means is that extremely successful people are very, very clear on their values. And if something doesn't perfectly align with where they're going and what their values are, they simply say no. And what we're hoping right now, Patrick and I, is that as you're listening, you're having an aha experience and you're realizing, wow, I could have a fully aligned life and only bring things, whether they're projects or opportunities, and human beings, whether they're spouses, partners, employees, vendors, clients, whatever, that fully align with who I am and where I'm going. And once you truly discover the power of this, it will be life-changing.
You know, when you say addicted to yes, I think you're talking about me and just about any other small business owner, entrepreneur that I've ever met. We're opportunity hounds, right? In other words, we believe that we can actually work for ourselves and get out there in the world and create value and get people to pay us for that value and be the master of our own destiny. And it's all about opportunity. So we literally become what I refer to as an opportunity hound. But the pain that goes along with that is extraordinary, where suddenly you have so much distraction, and we could talk about that at some point too, the whole distraction issue, and we have so much lack of attention to the doorman that we're turning our back and people are getting in the door when we're not looking. So that becomes a challenge, and I think the powerful part of what you were saying with Warren Buffett's quote is that you say no to almost everything. Think about if you've ever gone to a big city like New York and there's a new hot club. How many people are they letting in the door, right? And that's what makes them hot, is the fact that they don't just say, hey, we're open, first come, first served, come on in. It is, there's some pretty intimidating looking doormen out there. They're standing there with the velvet rope, and they're pointing and saying, you can come in. You guys, no, you look like we don't want you in our club. And it becomes this entire protocol, and what happens is people, when you say no, want to get in more.
Yep.
So it actually creates bigger opportunity, or maybe more powerful opportunity would be the way to characterize it. So these principles, I mean, if you really sit and digest what we're talking about here, because it hits you, you hear it, and I'm sharing my own experience with you working with Rick for a couple of years now. It's like, wow, I really like that. That's an interesting principle. But then you start to think about and observe your own activities day to day. Observe your start to finish and think in terms of doorman and values-based decision making during the course of your day, and suddenly you're like, wow, how things can and will be different, and what would have been if I had learned this some years ago. So this is really rich content.
Well, let's get real now, very real as it relates to me and you and our relationship. One of the things that I told Patrick from the first day that I met him, and you have to know that him and I are in an accountability group, and we're on the phone every single week. And I encourage you to get in some form of an accountability group. But what I want to do is take you back to the beginning of our relationship. And although it's only been 2 years, there's been a lot of richness to that 2 years. But the first conversation I ever had with Patrick, I said, Patrick, my number one value, and this is the lens that all decisions go through, my number one value is simplicity. Every decision that I make, whether it's personal or with my business, has to go through the lens of simplicity. And let me give you an example. Being the 7th of 9 children, I got to see in my family a lot of chaos. And I decided at a young age I wanted to have a relatively simple life. So when I got out of college and I got my first job, the first thing I did was, after I accepted the job, was I signed a lease on the next block. Because why commute? Sitting in a car for 45 minutes each way, which I think is the average commute in the United States, that A, didn't make sense to me, but B, didn't fit the value of simplicity. And I can tell you, 26 years later, I've never commuted. Anytime I ever took a job or started a company, I would move right next to it. And in fact, today, as we're filming, I live 2 blocks away from my office. So I'm using that example to demonstrate how you can change the course of your life by living your life through the lens of your values. And I only gave you one value. I actually have a list of 9 values that I make decisions through. Now, does this make me perfect? No, because as a human being, we always are tempted by opportunities. And all of us are tempted by opportunities. But what you want to train yourself to do is when you're about to make a decision, any decision, you want to consult with your doorman. And your doorman is a fictitious figure, but your doorman could be your spouse, it could be your lifetime assistant, it could be you yourself if you're disciplined enough, it could be, in our case, our accountability group.
Right.
Hey, Patrick, I'm about to make this decision. And he'll say, hey, wait a minute. That doesn't fit your value of family. That's not going to enhance your family life. I go, you know what? You're right. And I'm not going to choose opportunity over a value. And remember what we said earlier. Every single problem that we encounter in life starts when we choose opportunity over a value. So, a couple of things here, and you'll see this in your homework. You have to get crystal clear on what your values are. You have to get crystal clear on the future that you want to have so that you're making decisions, all decisions, through that lens. Future, values, etc. Everything needs to be aligned.
Well, as you can see, this is work, meaning you've got to put some brain work into this. This isn't vibey, okay, that feels good, and it just naturally happens. This takes your discipline in following through on what these modules are in total, and in particular with this module, following through on creating that list of values. And the people that you trust most are the people maybe you want to let into your room, to use the metaphor, to help you create these values. Having other people maybe participate in the process, I think, can be powerful, especially people who are mentors or business mentors, like I have with you. You know, I can get a lot of good information and feedback to help me create my own list and utilize that to make my decisions or create my doorman.
We also need to talk about the fact that we all have family members and we all have people that are very close to us that we're loyal to. I have some childhood friends that I'm very loyal to, and they're already in the room of my life. And what you need to do in situations like that, which is very critical to this process, is you're allowed to have people in the room of your life, but not certain aspects of those people. Let me give you an example. I have a good friend. Every time I see this friend, he wants me to loan him money, and it drives me bonkers. And I always had a lot of stress whenever I was with him. So one day I sat down with him and I said, if you call me or if you're with me and you mention money, I'm either hanging up the phone or I'm walking out. Literally, we'd be at dinner, in the middle of dinner, he'd go, oh, you don't understand my situation. At that point, I would call the waiter over, pay the bill, and leave. It took about 3 or 4 months, but then he got it. He has not mentioned money in over 6 years. So it's possible to have the human being in and an aspect of them out of the room, or it's possible to have the human being in and the project out of the room. An example of that is you've got a friend or whomever, and they want to start a business with you. And you could say to them, look, I appreciate you as a friend, but just so you know, and you could use these words, just so you know, that aspect of you is out of the room. So anytime you mention business or anytime you mention that project, I'm not interested. And they come to appreciate that. This will solve, in my opinion, if you can perfect this, almost 100% of the problems that you have in your life. And I was telling this once to a woman, and she says to me, how can this have solved my 16-year-old from getting on drugs? I said, well, what do you mean? It's very clear. Your 16-year-old son, at some point in his life, wasn't clear on his values, let a friend or an acquaintance or someone into his life that had a different set of values than he aspired to be, and that friend introduced him to drugs. And it was like a light bulb went off. Oh, I get it now. So I'm hoping that this information is clear for you, and once you do the homework, it should clear it all up nicely.
Now let's discuss the applications of values-based decision making. And remember that doorman principle that Rick is very passionate about, and for good reason, as discussed earlier. One of the things that Rick has drilled into my head over and over again is do not choose opportunity over value. Entrepreneurs are famous for this. They want to say yes to opportunity, but when you choose opportunity over value, you end up getting hurt somewhere down the road. Now, how might this apply? It can be in a lot of different ways. We could start out, for example, in professional offices, like varying doctors' offices or accountants or lawyers. When you let a client in, and this could be for any kind of business, incidentally, when you let a client in who is the wrong kind of person looking for a special deal, I will bet if you're in business, somebody came in and said, hey, listen, I can refer to you a lot of people, but I want a special deal to make all those referrals, to help you build your business, et cetera, et cetera. Or if they're crying poverty, not that we don't have a heart and we don't care about them. But the bottom line is, I have seen over and over again that problems occur when you start making special deals with people who feel like they have an entitlement to a special deal. As a result, you say, hey, I have the opportunity here for a new client, new patient, new customer, what have you. It's an opportunity, but it should violate your values, which is a fair exchange of money for the products or services that you're providing.
We call this values-based decision-making, but it's more than just values. It could be called rules-based decision-making or criteria-based decision-making. You need to have rules and criteria for all aspects of your life. An example of this in your personal life is, whether you're married or not, you could have a set of rules, if you will, or values or criteria for the type of people you want to hang out with. My wife and I like to have dinner parties, and we like to invite over very interesting people. And we have criteria for the type of people we like to interact with. We like a certain type of person. And you may think, well, this is kind of strange. But when you think about the ramifications and all of the leaked energy, because we're carrying relationships, because we want to do so much more for people and we get mad because we don't get it back. When you're a business person, when you're an entrepreneur, to a certain degree, you look at yourself as a humanitarian. You want to help the world. That's why you want to start a business. You see a need and you want to go after it. But because of that very aspect of our personalities to be humanitarian, we want to help people. We want to bend the rules. This person needs it. This new employee, they don't fit the company values, but we'll hire them anyway. My brother-in-law's out of work. Let's bring him in. But don't you think you're going to help far more people when you build a solid business, when you have a solid personal life, when you don't have leaked energy all over the place? As we've said, the biggest problems that people have in their lives typically start when they let someone pass their doorman. And we want you to apply some of the things we're going to talk about in the next few minutes to your business and to your life so you would begin to have leverage.
Another thing you might want to consider is applying these principles to your employees. It's not just your customers coming in, that's one application. But what about the employees that are in your business now? Do you have employees that don't share your values? Do you have employees that don't share the core values of the business? If the answer is yes, they got by your doorman, and maybe you just didn't have a doorman, which is how they got in. And I see this very frequently, incidentally, where people are trying to rationalize why they should hire somebody or why they did hire somebody. As soon as you have to start making excuses, especially when it's related to your values, you already know right then and there it's the wrong person. And you suffer, your customers suffer, other employees suffer, everybody suffers when you don't apply values-based decision-making to the people who are inside of the business. I'm sure you've seen this over and over again.
Over and over. And one thing I wanted to share is in Module 6, which is called Lessons from the Billionaire Mind, we actually collected all of the things that we've learned from my interviews with 14 self-made billionaires. And what I learned from them is they embrace values-based decision-making more than anyone else. They may not call it values-based decision-making, but they are so clear with why they were put on this earth. They were so clear with why their business is in business in the first place. They're so clear with what their purpose is. And by being crystal clear on all of that, they're clear on what enters their life. And when you don't have that clarity, that's when people and projects and situations come into your life that don't align with what your ultimate purpose is for being put on this earth. And that's when chaos ensues.
Another place that I really want you to listen, I want you to hear this, because this I have seen as an extremely destructive force, especially in the world the way it is today, where you can apply the doorman principle and apply this values-based decision-making, is who you hang out with. Your friends, your colleagues, especially business colleagues and relationships. If you find that you're hanging with people who are struggling, even if you are struggling, if you're hanging with people who are struggling, but rather than seeing past the struggle, they make their whole life about the struggle. One of my favorite Ayn Rand quotes is, "Pain and struggle are so enormously unimportant." And it really is. People try to make their life about their pain, about their struggle, and then they start to resent people who don't. So every time right now, if you're enrolled in this program, it means that you have a value to improve your life, to improve your business, that this is important for you. You want to succeed. And if you're hanging out with people who are basically embracing and celebrating their struggle and their failures and make their life about that, and all they do is talk about all the forces outside of them that keep them oppressed, you don't want to be around that. You may care about them, and there's nothing wrong with you caring about them, but you have to think about values-based decision-making. Who are you letting in your life? Because it is invariable. Any expert will tell you, you will become who you hang out with. I can't remember, I wish I can give proper attribution here, but one expert said, you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with most. You're going to be the average of those 5 people. So value who those people are. Make sure that they're the right kind of people. If you were to say, hey, I'm going to put this average together, Is this going to be a low average, a high average? Is it what I want to be? This is where your values-based decisions comes into play. And again, we all like to talk to other businessmen, businesswomen, entrepreneurs, whomever. We want to be around these people and share and mastermind. But I have to tell you, more often than not, these people who are struggling want other people to also struggle with them. And because you're in business finishing school right now and you're going to start applying these principles, you're going to see your success start to grow. And really at this point, there's two choices for the people you're hanging out with. Put them in business finishing school also so they can understand you and they can grow and they should be excited by that. Or if they sit there and start to resent you, they're going to find ways to pull you back down as you're starting to break away from the pack. So choose carefully who you're hanging out with.
And many of you listening are running very large companies. And I tend to get the most feedback from people who are extremely successful. Because even when they're extremely successful, they still want more leverage and more simplicity and more probability in their lives. So we're talking to you as well, whether you're up here or you're just starting out. Now, this is an interesting quote that I heard from Mark Youngblood. He said, entrepreneurs get the company they deserve. Entrepreneurs get the company they deserve. So by instituting this principle, you'll start to deserve more. I want to share a personal story that talks about colleagues and how it kind of rubs off. More than 20 years ago now, I was studying to take the Series 7 test. And a lot of people think that's a hard test, but basically if you study for it, you'll pass it. But I remember about 20 people from my company had all come into the same training program, and we were going through a 5-day program to pass the Series 7 test. And I remember it was about at the end of the first day of the program, I was talking to the instructor, and I was worried about who would pass and who would fail and would I pass. And her name was Dee, and she said, "Oh, you'll pass. Don't worry about it." And I said, "Oh, okay, thank you." And she proceeded to tell me after one day exactly who would pass the test and exactly who would fail the test. And she told me exactly who would pass and exactly who would fail. Unbelievable. I said, okay. So 3 or 4 weeks later, we all passed the test, and she was 100% right. And I said, because we became friends after that, I said to her, "How did you know?" And she said, "I've been teaching this class so long, I know who'll pass and who'll fail because all the people that will fail the test hang out together and they congregate. And they typically congregate in the back of the room and they don't pay attention. And the people who will pass the test, they sit in the front rows and they listen, plain and simple." Isn't this an incredible metaphor for life? And I would assert, by virtue of the fact that you're in business finishing school, that you will be in the category of people who will pass. You will pass the business test. You will have more simplicity, probability, and leverage in your life.
Another example or application of values-based decision making and how it might show up. All entrepreneurs, whether you're in a healthcare practice, whether you are a lawyer, an accountant, whether you have a store of some type, a retail store, whether you're an internet marketer, whatever it might be, there's always opportunity for growth and expansion. You're always looking for ways to expand what you do. Sometimes even, quote unquote, diversify, and we'll have conversations about that later in the program, later modules when we get into business entity structure. Really deep conversation there. But the point is this. Sometimes you're chasing the shiny penny and you're saying, wow, this is a great opportunity. But maybe it's leading you to do something that's really not aligned with your own values personally. And it could be a couple of different ways. For example, I know many doctors who say, I'm successful in this practice, but there's an opportunity on the other side of town to have a second practice. And I want to go after that. And it might be somewhat aligned with your values in your career, because this has to be broad-based values, not just your career. But now you're going to have twice the overhead, twice the work, a lot more hours, split your attention, and further, what does it do to your personal life? What does it do with the hours with your children? What does it do with the hours with your spouse? It might detract from that. Now, I'm not saying it's a wrong thing to do, but you have to do it based on your values, saying, well, I got to protect my values with my time with my family, which is very important, which means that if I'm going to do such a thing, I have to structure it in a way where it doesn't cannibalize any more of my time, where maybe I have to bring in additional partners. And again, when we get to the module that's on business entity structure, we'll talk deeper about this. But in the end, you have to consider not a narrow range of your values, but your most important values, both personally and professionally. Sometimes also practitioners will say, wow, well, I could expand and start selling this in my store. But if the this that you're selling is something that you're not aligned with in your personal values, you see it as an opportunity, but it's going to take something away from you. It's going to take your spirit away. It's hard enough to succeed when you're passionate about what you're doing. It becomes almost toxic to try to succeed when you're promulgating or selling or promoting something that you don't even resonate with. In other words, if you're a healthy person and you believe in good health, you don't want to make money selling cigarettes, do you? You don't want to make money selling things that would make people sick. So you have to look for opportunities that are in alignment with who you are, so your passion behind it can help thrust you into success that's sustainable and long-term. So whatever the opportunities are, look at the totality of your life. One other application that I will suggest here is also your own health. My health is a big priority to me. I need to take care of myself first, because if I'm not healthy, I can't take care of anybody else. So I will always avoid decisions that somehow are going to get in the way of me being able to take proper care of myself, things that are going to stress me. I had a deal actually not that long ago where I could take 60% of a company that was already profitable, and that was something that would really dovetail well with one of my companies, and that could expand us and provide a lot of revenue. But when I really did almost a year of due diligence here, and I analyzed this company, and I looked at what it was going to take, and we started to put together a strategic plan, and I started getting very excited. One side of me also started getting very sick, looking at the hours that were going to go in, the amount of travel that was going to have to ensue, and everything else, and recognized this is in violation of the value that says I need to take care of me and have time for my family. Even though it was a great business opportunity, and even though it was a company that I liked and I still continue to like. But at the last moment, I had to, what most people would say, well, that was an amazing deal for you, and it would have been a good deal for them too. But the bottom line is, it would have had such a negative impact on my life that I might have been successful in the deal and miserable as a human being.
Well, we hope we have inspired you with this module. I want to end now by telling you to please trust your doorman. Your doorman or your gut, they'll always tell you when you're going astray. We also hope that we inspired you so much that you share this program with other people. We are not using traditional marketing methods to expand this message. We have a catalyzing statement: a successful entrepreneur inside of every business. So please share this information with your friends and colleagues and networks, and get them into Business Finishing School and help spread this important message. I also want to remind you now to engage with the implementation guides. Spend an hour or two and get situated in your life and get all of these values clear so that you can begin to have leverage. So that's it for Module 1. Congratulations on being a part of Business Finishing School.
Thank you for watching this module of Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started.